The emergency klaxons aboard the Galactic Council's primary monitoring station, Nexus Prime, had been wailing for 17 straight hours. Commander Zeleth of the Valoran Empire pressed his three-fingered hands against his elongated skull, trying to process the impossible readings flooding his screens. The gravitational sensors showed something massive moving through hyperspace at velocities that should have torn any known vessel apart. The energy signatures were unlike anything in the Council's extensive databases spanning 47 different spacefaring civilizations. "Status report, Technician Kree," Zeleth commanded, his voice carrying the authoritative tone that had earned him command of the galaxy's most advanced early warning system. The insectoid Kreetar clicked his mandibles nervously before responding. "Sir, the object maintains course for the Terran system. Estimated arrival in 6 standard hours. Mass readings indicate a vessel approximately 12 kilometers in length, but the density measurements are unprecedented." Zeleth's violet eyes narrowed. The Terran system had been under observation for the past 50 cycles since the humans had achieved faster-than-light travel. The Council had classified them as a Level 2 civilization, notable primarily for their unusual tendency toward aggression and their primitive but effective military technologies. Most Council members viewed them as barely worth monitoring, assuming they would either destroy themselves or fade into obscurity like countless other young species. "Sir," Kree interrupted his thoughts, "we're receiving a transmission from the approaching vessel. It's in perfect galactic standard." The main view screen flickered to life, revealing a human male with graying hair and steel-blue eyes that seemed to contain the weight of countless battles. Behind him, the bridge of his vessel bustled with activity as other humans worked at stations that appeared to blend advanced technology with what the Council would consider primitive mechanical interfaces. "This is Admiral Marcus Kane of the United Earth Defense Force vessel Prometheus. We are en route to address the situation in the Kethvar system. We request immediate clearance through Galactic Council space." Zeleth felt his respiratory organs seize. The Kethvar system was the site of an ongoing catastrophe that had already claimed 17 worlds. The Devourers, an ancient mechanical intelligence that consumed entire planets to fuel their expansion, had awakened after eons of dormancy. Every major fleet in the galaxy had attempted to stop them, only to be systematically destroyed or absorbed into their growing armada. "Admiral Kane," Zeleth began, struggling to maintain diplomatic protocol while processing this unexpected development. "The Galactic Council appreciates Earth's concern, but the Kethvar situation has been classified as a galactic extinction event. Our most advanced fleets have already been obliterated." Kane interrupted bluntly. "We're aware of the situation, Commander. We've been monitoring your communications. 43 capital ships lost, over 2 million casualties, and the Devourers are still expanding toward the core worlds at an accelerating pace." Zeleth's mandibles clicked in surprise. Earth wasn't supposed to have the technology to intercept encrypted Council transmissions, yet this human spoke with intimate knowledge of their most classified intelligence reports. "With respect, Admiral," Zeleth continued, "the human fleet consists of perhaps 24 vessels. The mathematical probability of success against an enemy that has defeated our combined forces is 0, Kane finished. "According to your calculations. But your calculations don't account for human engineering philosophy, Commander. When we build something, we build it to last. And when we build something to fight, we build it to win or take as many of the enemy down with us as possible." The transmission cut to an exterior view of the Prometheus as it dropped out of hyperspace. Zeleth felt his circulatory fluid run cold. The vessel was massive beyond anything Earth should have been capable of constructing. Its hull was a dark, matte black that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Weapon ports lined every surface, and the ship's design spoke of pure function over form. This wasn't the sleek, elegant architecture favored by advanced civilizations. This was something built by beings who understood that space was hostile and that everything in it was potentially trying to kill you. How was all Zalith could manage. Kane's image returned to the screen, and for the first time he smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. 3 years ago, one of your routine patrols crashed on Earth. The crew didn't survive, but their ship did. We learned some interesting things about galactic technology standards. Zalith's mind raced. The exploration vessel Harmony had indeed disappeared 3 years prior while conducting a routine survey of the Sol system's outer planets. The official report listed it as lost to mechanical failure, a not uncommon occurrence given the budget constraints on exploration vessels. We discovered that your ships are built with efficiency in mind, Kane continued. Lightweight materials, energy conservation, elegant solutions to complex problems. Very impressive from an engineering standpoint. But you know what we found most interesting? Your weapons are designed to disable, not destroy. Your shields are optimized for deflecting energy weapons. Your hull plating is designed to flex and absorb impacts rather than resist them absolutely. Kane paused, letting that sink in before continuing. We build things differently on Earth, Commander. Our ships aren't elegant, and they're certainly not efficient by your standards. But when we put guns on something, we make sure those guns can crack a planet. When we build armor, we build it to stop anything short of a star going nova. And when we build engines, we build them to keep running even when everything else is on fire and falling apart. The sensor readings from the Prometheus seemed to confirm Kane's words. The ship's mass was nearly double what it should be for its size, suggesting armor plating that bordered on the ridiculous. The energy output from its engines was so high that several Council monitoring stations had initially mistaken it for a small star. Admiral, Zalith said carefully, even assuming your vessel is as formidable as these readings suggest, the Devourers number in the thousands. They adapt to any weapon used against them, incorporating destroyed vessels into their own fleet. They cannot be reasoned with, negotiated with, or deterred. Commander, Kane replied, has anyone tried hitting them with a moon? Before Zalith could respond to that disturbing question, his tactical officer called out in alarm. Sir, multiple hyperspace signatures detected. Massive fleet emerging from slip space near the Kethvar system. The main display shifted to show the tactical situation at Kethvar. Over 800 Devourer vessels were systematically stripping the fourth planet in the system, their dark hulls pulsing with absorbed energy as they converted matter into more ships. It was a sight that had become horrifyingly familiar over the past few months. But now something else was emerging from hyperspace. One by one, human vessels materialized in perfect formation. They were all built along the same utilitarian lines as the Prometheus, but each was clearly designed for a specific purpose. Massive dreadnoughts bristling with weapons that looked large enough to level cities. Smaller but faster vessels that seemed to be nothing but engines and missile tubes. And behind them all, something that defied classification. What is that? Kree whispered, his compound eyes fixed on the largest signature. Kane's smile became positively predatory. That technician is the UEDF Ragnarok. We built her in the asteroid belt using materials from the Harmony and 3 years of round-the-clock construction. She's not technically a ship at all. The Ragnarok finished its translation into normal space, and every being watching the display fell silent. It was, quite literally, a weaponized asteroid. The humans had hollowed out a small moon, fitted it with engines that belonged on a battleship, and covered every square meter of its surface with weapons. It was an obscenity against every principle of elegant spacecraft design, and it was absolutely terrifying. The Devourers adapt to energy weapons, projectile weapons, and exotic matter streams, Kane explained casually. but we couldn't find any reference to them adapting to having a mountain thrown at them at a significant fraction of light speed. Zelith realized his mouth was hanging open and closed it with a snap. Admiral, that's insane. Sanity is overrated when you're facing extinction, Commander. Besides, humans have never been accused of thinking inside the box. We prefer to beat our enemies to death with the box while it's on fire. The human fleet began moving toward the Devourer swarm with a coordination that spoke of extensive drilling. The smaller vessels spread out in a complex pattern, while the capital ships formed a spearhead formation with the Prometheus at its tip. The Ragnarok, meanwhile, began accelerating directly toward the largest concentration of enemy vessels. All Council vessels are ordered to maintain safe distance, Kane announced. What's about to happen will be energetic. Zelith could only watch in horrified fascination as the human fleet engaged an enemy that had crushed every military force in the galaxy. The first exchange of fire lit up the darkness of space like a newborn star, and he realized that nothing would ever be the same again. The Devourers, detecting the approaching threat, immediately began repositioning their fleet to face this new challenger. Their ships, sleek constructions of living metal that could repair themselves and adapt to any weapon, moved with fluid grace through space. They had learned from their encounters with galactic forces, incorporating the best technologies from dozens of defeated civilizations. They were, by any reasonable analysis, unstoppable. But as Kane had pointed out, humans had never been particularly reasonable. The first salvo from the human fleet was unlike anything in the Council's military databases. Instead of the precise, efficient energy beams favored by galactic militaries, the humans opened fire with what could only be described as barely controlled chaos. Massive projectile rounds the size of shuttlecraft, each one accelerated to tremendous velocities and containing enough explosive material to vaporize a city block. Particle beams that seemed to ignore conventional physics, burning through Devourer hulls as if they were made of paper. And strangest of all, weapons that appeared to tear holes in space itself, creating gravitational anomalies that crushed entire Devourer squadrons. The Devourers, for the first time since their awakening, seemed genuinely surprised. Their adaptation protocols, designed to counter energy weapons and conventional projectiles, struggled to cope with the sheer variety and brutality of human weaponry. Several ships attempted to absorb projectile rounds as they would energy blasts, only to discover that the human shells contained thermonuclear warheads that detonated inside their hulls. But the true shock came when the Ragnarok reached attack velocity. Zelith watched in stunned silence as the weaponized asteroid, mass over 50 billion tons and moving at 20% of light speed, plowed directly into the center of the Devourer formation. The impact was visible from 3 star systems away as matter converted to energy in quantities that briefly outshone the local sun. When the light faded, a significant portion of the Devourer fleet had simply ceased to exist. The survivors, their adaptation protocols completely overwhelmed by an attack that defied every principle of space combat, found themselves facing a human fleet that had barely slowed down. Kane's voice crackled across the communications array. "This is Admiral Kane to all surviving Devourer units. You have 30 seconds to begin immediate withdrawal from this system, or we will demonstrate why Earth's combat vessels are built for war, not exploration. Choose wisely." The Devourer's response was swift and decisive. Instead of withdrawing, the remaining vessels began a complex maneuver that every galactic military academy taught as the Swarm Protocol. The surviving ships formed into smaller, more agile formations, while simultaneously broadcasting adaptation data to reinforce units throughout the galaxy. Within minutes, hundreds of additional Devourer vessels began emerging from hyperspace, each one already configured to counter the weapons that had proven so devastating in the initial engagement. Commander Zelith watched from Nexus Prime as the tactical situation shifted dramatically. The human fleet, which had moments before seemed unstoppable, now faced odds of nearly 6-1 against an enemy that had learned from its mistakes. The sensor readings showed Devourer hulls already adapting, growing thicker armor plating where the human projectiles had penetrated, developing energy absorption matrices designed to counter the exotic particle beams. "Admiral Kane," Zelith transmitted urgently, "our tactical computers show massive enemy reinforcements. The Devourers are adapting to your weapon signatures. Recommend immediate withdrawal to preserve your forces." Kane's response came back steady and calm, though in the background Zelith could hear the controlled chaos of a warship in combat. "Negative, Commander. We expected this response. In fact, we were counting on it." The human admiral's words made no sense to Zelith's analytical mind. How could any commander count on facing impossible odds against an adaptive enemy? But before he could formulate a response, something extraordinary happened. The human fleet began to change. Zelith had assumed the weapons used in the initial engagement represented the full extent of human military technology. He was about to discover just how wrong that assumption was. As the Devourer reinforcements closed in, the human vessels suddenly sprouted entirely different weapon systems. Hull plates retracted to reveal batteries of weapons, unlike anything seen in the first exchange. Instead of the massive projectile cannons, the ships now displayed arrays of devices that made Zelith's sensors struggle to classify them. "You see, Commander," Kane's voice continued, "humans learned something important from studying your crashed ship. We learned that galactic military doctrine assumes enemies will use consistent weapon types. Your databases contain detailed analysis of energy signatures, projectile velocities, and exotic matter streams. Very thorough documentation. The first of the new human weapons fired, and Zelith's worldview shifted fundamentally. Instead of projectiles or energy beams, the human ships launched what appeared to be small metallic spores that spread throughout space like a cloud. When they encountered Devourer vessels, they didn't impact or explode. They simply adhered to the hulls and began to eat. "Nanomachine swarms," Kane explained casually as Devourer ships began dissolving at the molecular level. "We figured if the enemy adapts by incorporating defeated technology, we'd give them something interesting to try to digest. Those little fellows are designed to treat any matter more complex than hydrogen as a potential fuel source." Zelith watched in horrified fascination as entire Devourer squadrons were consumed by clouds of microscopic machines that converted their hull materials into more nanomachines. The enemy's adaptation protocols, designed to counter conventional weapons, had no response to being literally eaten alive at the atomic level. But the humans weren't finished. As the Devourers struggled to adapt to the nanomachine assault, the human fleet deployed its next surprise. Several of the smaller vessels suddenly expanded, their hulls unfolding like mechanical flowers to reveal complex arrays of crystalline structures. These formations began to pulse with energy that made every sensor on Nexus Prime shriek in alarm. "Dimensional resonance cannons," Kane announced. "We theorized that if your enemies exist in normal space-time, they might have trouble adapting to attacks from parallel dimensions. Turns out we were right." The crystalline arrays fired and reality seemed to hiccup. Devourer ships simply vanished. Not destroyed, but translated into dimensional spaces where the laws of physics operated according to different rules. Those that didn't disappear entirely found their adaptive hull materials struggling to cope with matter that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Technician Kree's mandibles clicked frantically as he tried to process the readings. "Sir, the humans appear to have deployed at least 12 different categories of exotic weapons, none of which appear in any galactic database. How is this possible?" Zelith was beginning to understand. They've been preparing for this specific engagement for 3 years. Every weapon system was designed specifically to counter Devourer adaptation protocols. Kane's voice confirmed his suspicions. "Exactly, Commander. See, humans have this concept called overkill. It means using vastly more force than necessary to ensure absolute victory. When we learned about the Devourers, we didn't just build weapons to fight them. We built weapons to fight them, their adaptations to those weapons, their adaptations to those adaptations, and their adaptations to those. The tactical display showed the truth of Kane's words. As fast as the Devourers adapted to one weapon system, the humans deployed another that exploited entirely different physical principles. Temporal displacement weapons that attacked enemies in the past. Probability bombs that altered the mathematical likelihood of Devourer survival. Consciousness disruptors that targeted the artificial intelligence controlling the enemy fleet. But perhaps most terrifying of all was what the humans did when they captured intact Devourer vessels. Instead of studying them or attempting communication, they immediately converted them into additional human warships, using rapid construction nanites that turned enemy hulls into crude but effective human-style weapons platforms. Within hours of the battle's start, the Devourer fleet found itself fighting not just humans, but corrupted versions of their own ships that had been rebuilt according to human military philosophy. The Galactic Council's most advanced tactical computers, designed to predict the outcome of any military engagement, simply displayed error messages when asked to calculate human victory probabilities. The variables involved exceeded their processing capabilities. Zelith found himself in the unprecedented position of watching an enemy that had terrorized the galaxy for months being systematically dismantled by a species most council members considered primitive. The Devourers, for the first time in recorded history, began attempting to withdraw from an engagement. Kane's response was immediate and ruthless. Negative. No survivors, no witnesses, no data to be transmitted to other Devourer units. Complete elimination is the only acceptable outcome. The human fleet shifted formation again, this time into what could only be described as a hunting pack formation. The larger vessels formed a perimeter to prevent escape while smaller, faster ships darted in to finish off damaged enemy units. But the humans had saved their most devastating weapon for last. The Prometheus itself, which had remained relatively inactive during the main engagement, suddenly began generating an energy signature that made every sensor in the system scream warnings. The ship's hull started to glow with an inner light that suggested barely contained stellar energies. "This is Admiral Kane to all galactic observers," came the transmission. Kane's voice now carrying an edge of grim satisfaction. "What you're about to witness is classified as a species extinction weapon. We call it the Nova Cannon. It was originally designed to crack planets, but we've found it's also effective against large enemy formations." Zelith's voice came out as a whisper. "Admiral, you can't be serious. A weapon capable of destroying planets?" "Commander," Kane replied, "humans don't build weapons to wound enemies. We build them to remove enemies from existence so thoroughly that their atoms forget they ever organized themselves into hostile formations." The Prometheus fired. The Nova Cannon lived up to its name, releasing energies comparable to a small stellar explosion in a focused beam that speared through the heart of the Devourer formation. Ships didn't explode or dissolve, they simply ceased to exist at the subatomic level. Their matter converted directly to energy and scattered across interstellar space. The beam continued for 17 seconds, carving a path of absolute destruction through the enemy fleet. When it ended, fewer than 30 Devourer vessels remained from a force that had numbered over 800. These survivors, their adaptation protocols completely overwhelmed, attempted desperate escape maneuvers only to discover that the human fleet had anticipated this as well. "Pursuit drones," Kane explained as small, fast objects detached from human vessels and began chasing down the fleeing enemies. "They're equipped with quantum entanglement trackers. No matter where those ships go, no matter how they try to hide, the drones will find them." Zelith watched in stunned silence as the drones caught up with the fleeing Devourers and attached themselves to enemy hulls. Instead of exploding, They simply activated beacon signals that allowed the human fleet to target the escapees with pinpoint accuracy across vast distances. The last Devourer vessel was destroyed 47 minutes after the engagement began. What had taken the combined fleets of the Galactic Council months to barely slow down, the humans had eliminated in less than an hour. Kane's final transmission was addressed to the entire galactic community. "This is Admiral Kane of the United Earth Defense Force. The Devourer threat has been neutralized. All enemy vessels in this sector have been destroyed. We are transmitting technical specifications for our weapon systems to all Council members, along with detailed tactical analysis of Devourer weaknesses." Zelith found his voice. "Admiral, surely you don't intend to share such devastating military technology freely?" Kane's laugh was without humor. "Commander, these weapons were built specifically for the Devourers. Against any conventional galactic military force, they'd be massive overkill. But yes, we're sharing the technology, because next time something like this happens, we want our neighbors to be able to defend themselves without having to call for human intervention." The implications of Kane's words settled over Zelith like a cold weight. The humans weren't conquering. They were establishing themselves as the galaxy's ultimate deterrent force. Any future threat would have to consider the possibility of facing weapons designed by beings who considered star-destroying cannons to be reasonable defensive measures. As the human fleet began salvage operations in the debris field that had once been the Devourer Armada, Zelith realized that the balance of power in the galaxy had just shifted permanently. Earth's combat vessels hadn't just journeyed through the heavens. They had fundamentally altered the nature of galactic civilization itself. 6 months after the Kethvar engagement, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session on the neutral station of Harmony's Rest. Representatives from 47 civilizations gathered in the Great Assembly Hall, but all attention focused on the simple metal chair occupied by Admiral Marcus Kane. The humans sat calmly among beings who had ruled the galaxy for millennia, seemingly unaware that his presence had fundamentally altered the political landscape of known space. Chancellor Vextar of the Hegemony, the Council's longest-serving member, opened the proceedings with barely concealed irritation. "Admiral Kane, in the 6 months since your intervention at Kethvar, we have received disturbing reports from across the galaxy. It seems humanity has taken it upon itself to engage in what you call peacekeeping operations." Kane nodded politely. "That's correct, Chancellor. We've responded to 17 separate conflicts, mediated 3 trade disputes, and eliminated 2 pirate organizations that were disrupting shipping lanes. Is there a problem with our assistance?" Vextar's 4 eyes all focused on Kane with predatory intensity. "The problem, Admiral, is that your methods are causing concern among established powers. The Zefkari Consortium complained that when they attempted to blockade the Telian system, your forces destroyed their entire fleet in 11 minutes. The Telians had signed a mutual defense pact with Earth," Kane replied calmly. "The consortium was attempting to steal their dilithium deposits through economic coercion backed by military force. We simply reminded them that theft is illegal under galactic law." Commander Zelith, now serving as the Council's liaison to human forces, pulled up the tactical records on his display. Even 6 months later, the numbers still seemed impossible. The consortium had deployed over 200 vessels, including their flagship Dreadnought, against what they assumed would be a minor human patrol. Instead, they encountered the UEDF destroyer Nemesis, which had single-handedly dismantled their entire force using weapons that defied conventional physics. "Admiral," interjected Senator Krill of the Maritime Alliance, "our intelligence reports suggest that Earth has constructed over 40 new vessels in the past 6 months, ships that make your original fleet appear primitive by comparison. The Galactic Arms Limitation Treaties clearly state—" Kane's expression hardened slightly. "Senator, Earth never signed your arms limitation treaties. We were never invited to participate in their drafting, and frankly, we wouldn't have agreed to them if we had been. Those treaties assume that all spacefaring civilizations share similar technological approaches and military philosophies. That assumption is demonstrably false. Zelith accessed the latest intelligence reports on human shipbuilding activities and felt his respiratory organs constrict. The humans hadn't just been building ships, they had been constructing entire mobile shipyards that converted asteroids and dead planets into raw materials for their expanding fleet. The UEDF now possessed over 300 vessels of various classes, each one more terrifyingly overpowered than the last. The newest addition to their fleet, the UEDF Apocalypse, was reportedly equipped with something called a Galactic Reset Cannon that could theoretically sterilize entire star systems. The fact that humans had built such a weapon suggested a mindset that troubled even the galaxy's most militaristic species. The real issue, Chancellor Vextar continued, is that your interventions are disrupting established political structures. The Korthax Empire has held dominion over the Spiral Arm for 3,000 years. When they attempted to expand into the Terran Protected Zone, your response was to reduce their capital fleet to constituent atoms and demand tribute payments to rebuild the worlds they had damaged. Kane shrugged. The Korthax Empire was engaging in aggressive expansion using weapons of mass destruction against civilian populations. We stopped them. The tribute payments are going directly to refugee relocation and planetary reconstruction efforts. I fail to see the problem. Zelith privately agreed with Kane's assessment, though he would never say so publicly. The Korthax had been notorious for their brutal conquest methods, using biological weapons that rendered entire worlds uninhabitable. The human intervention had been swift, decisive, and remarkably restrained by human standards. Kane could have reduced the Korthax homeworld to plasma. Instead, he had simply parked a human dreadnought in orbit and politely requested that they reconsider their expansion policies. The fact that the Korthax had immediately capitulated said volumes about how other civilizations now viewed human military capabilities. Admiral Kane, said Counselor Thrix, representing the pacifist ethereal collective, while we appreciate your efforts to maintain peace, your methods are causing fear throughout the galaxy. The very existence of weapons capable of destroying entire star systems creates an atmosphere of terror. Kane leaned back in his chair, considering his response carefully. Counselor, I understand your concerns, but I think you're misunderstanding human motivations. We didn't build these weapons to terrorize anyone. We built them because we learned that the galaxy contains threats that conventional weapons cannot stop. He activated a holographic display that showed a star map of known space. Red markers indicated locations where Devourer technology had been detected, even after their supposed elimination. 3 weeks ago, we discovered a Devourer research facility in the Void sector that had been operating for decades, Kane continued. The facility contained blueprints for weapons that would have made the original Devourer fleet look like toys. They had been preparing for a war of galactic extinction, planning to consume not just inhabited worlds but entire solar systems to fuel their expansion. The assembled representatives fell silent as Kane showed them images from the facility. Massive construction bays designed to build ships the size of moons. Research labs where Devourer scientists had been experimenting with ways to consume stars directly. Most disturbing of all, evidence that the Devourers had been infiltrating galactic society for centuries, slowly gathering intelligence and preparing for their eventual awakening. The facility's computers contained targeting lists, Kane said quietly. Every inhabited world in the galaxy, prioritized by population density and resource availability. The Devourers weren't just planning to destroy galactic civilization, they were planning to optimize the process. Zelith felt a chill run through his exoskeleton. The implications were staggering. If the humans hadn't intervened when they did, the galaxy would have faced an enemy that had been preparing for total war for generations. So yes, Kane continued, we build weapons capable of destroying star systems. Because sometimes, Counselor, the only way to preserve life is to possess the ability to end it absolutely. The Devourers understood this. That's why they were building planet killers. The difference is that humans build such weapons to defend life, not to consume it. Chancellor Vexitar's mandibles clicked in agitation. Even accepting your rationale, Admiral, the question remains. What happens when humanity decides that other civilizations pose a threat? Who watches the Watchers? Kane stood up, his movement causing several of the smaller representatives to instinctively step back. Chancellor, I think you're asking the wrong question. You shouldn't be wondering what happens if humanity becomes a threat. You should be asking what we'll do when the next galactic extinction event arrives. The holographic display shifted to show deep space sensor readings from the galactic rim. Zealith recognized the signatures immediately and felt his worldview shift once again. Energy patterns consistent with massive fleet movements in dark space. Gravitational anomalies suggesting the presence of vessels beyond anything in current databases. Most disturbing of all, quantum signature readings that matched no known technology. We call them the Harbingers, Kane said matter-of-factly. Long-range sensors detected them approximately 4 months ago. Based on their current trajectory and velocity, they'll reach the outer rim of galactic space in 18 months. Our preliminary analysis suggests they're operating technology that makes the Devourers look primitive. The assembly hall erupted in panicked discussions as representatives processed this new threat. Zealith found himself calculating fleet compositions and defensive strategies, only to realize that every scenario ended in total galactic defeat. If the readings were accurate, the incoming force possessed capabilities that exceeded every known military doctrine. Kane waited for the discussions to die down before continuing. The good news is that we have 18 months to prepare. The bad news is that preparation will require unprecedented cooperation between human forces and the established galactic militaries. What exactly are you proposing? Vexitar asked, though Zealith suspected the Chancellor already knew the answer. Integration, Kane replied simply. Human military advisors working with galactic fleets to upgrade their capabilities, shared technology development programs, joint training exercises, and most importantly, unified command structure when the Harbingers arrive. The implications hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Kane was essentially proposing that humanity take military leadership of the entire galaxy. Given their demonstrated capabilities, it was probably the only rational choice, but it meant acknowledging that every established military power was now subordinate to a species that had been considered barely civilized just months earlier. Zealith found himself speaking before he consciously decided to. Admiral, assuming we agree to this integration, what guarantees do we have that humanity won't use this position to dominate galactic politics? Kane's smile was genuinely warm for the first time since the session began. Commander, you're still thinking like politicians instead of soldiers. We don't want to rule the galaxy. We want to save it. There's a significant difference. He activated another display showing the current human fleet disposition. Instead of concentrated near Earth or in defensible positions, human vessels were spread throughout galactic space, positioned to respond rapidly to any emerging threat. It was the deployment pattern of protectors, not conquerors. Human military doctrine is built around a simple principle, Kane explained. The best defense is overwhelming offense deployed in defense of others. We build weapons capable of cracking planets so that we never have to use them. We position our fleets throughout space so that any aggressor has to consider fighting humanity before they attack anyone else. Zealith realized that Kane was describing a fundamental shift in how galactic civilization would function. Instead of the traditional balance of power between competing empires, humanity was establishing itself as the ultimate arbiter of galactic conflicts. Any species considering aggressive expansion would have to account for the possibility of facing weapons that could erase them from existence. The choice is yours, Kane concluded. You can continue operating under the old paradigms, building fleets to fight each other while ignoring existential threats, or you can work with us to build something better. But understand this: when the Harbingers arrive, humanity will respond with everything we have. The question is whether we'll be fighting alone or alongside allies who understand that survival sometimes requires accepting uncomfortable realities. Chancellor Vextar looked around the assembly hall, seeing the same recognition in every representative's eyes. The galaxy had changed forever the day Earth's combat vessels journeyed through the heavens. Now they had to decide whether to adapt to that change or be left behind by it. The vote, when it came, was unanimous. 18 months later, when sensors detected the first Harbinger scout ships crossing into galactic space, they were met not by a collection of competing civilizations, but by a unified fleet flying under Earth's military command. The Harbingers learned what the Devourers had learned before them. Humanity didn't just build ships to explore the stars. They built them to defend the stars and everything living beneath them, with a ruthlessness that made extinction a preferable alternative to surrender. The galaxy would never be the same, but it would survive. And in the end, Zelith reflected, that was all that truly mattered.